We are hanging out here with Pete Parada, famous drummer, formerly of the Offspring. And there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, but I guess it's like the first interview you've ever done following the news situation you found yourself in.
Yeah, I mean, for about a year and a half, I've just sort of stayed out of it, stayed away from it. And, you know, I didn't want to talk to anybody that's all they wanted to talk about, you know.
We're definitely going to talk about it, vax
sure,
mandates
yeah.
and being in the band. But no, yeah, I thought it'd be cool, and I appreciate you coming on and talking about it, but there's probably a bunch of other stuff we could talk about for sure. The gist of the story, I guess, is you played in the band The Offspring, which I'm sure many people have heard of, for 14 years.
Yep.
14 years, and then they unceremoniously fired you over the vax mandates.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I guess we'll just dive right in.
Well, we will,
yeah.
but that's I want to make sure like everybody who's tuning in, now they understand like the big cultural context, I suppose. But I'm definitely interested in talking to you about the music industry in general, and I want to start off by telling you a quick story, which is just really crazy. So what is today's Friday? Wednesday night, after we wrapped Timcast IRL, I go back to my house. I don't know if you heard me say this, but I'll tell you the story anyway. And I'm getting ready for bed. I go into my bedroom with my girlfriend, right? And I turn the TV on. It's a smart TV, meaning like you turn a smart TV on, you got to pick an app.
Right.
Normally when I turn it on, there's nothing on. So I turn the TV on, put the remote down, go in the bathroom, take out my contacts, you know, wash my face or something. And then all of a sudden I hear Kill Boy Powerhead, Offspring song. Yeah. And I'm like, did Allison turn something on? And I walk back into the room and she goes, Allison says, did you turn this on? And I was like, no. And I look and it's you at a big show playing in the Offspring with, you know, and Kill Boy Powerhead was a song y'all were playing. And then Allison was like, that's really weird.
That's super weird.
And I was like, I didn't turn. She's like, you turned this on. I was like, no, I didn't. I just pressed power. Like, what app would I even turn on to make this happen, to make this song play?
It's pretty deep cut too.
Yeah. I was like, and then, well, at first I see Dexter. He's the lead singer of The Offspring. He's singing, Kill Boy Powerhead. And I'm like, well, of course I know the song. And then it cuts to you playing the drums. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. But anyway, I just thought it was weird that like you were coming here to talk about these issues and a bunch of other stuff. And sure enough, that weird serendipitous thing happened. So we'll get into it now that I've wasted enough of people's time. You know, I'm reading the news. It was weird when the story broke because it actually didn't get a lot of coverage initially. It was like music blogs and, you know, Offspring fans, and there was murmuring with like the music scene that the drummer for the Offspring had been fired for being an anti-vaxxer.
Mm-hmm.
Or
everyone loves that term.
Exactly. And then, you know, of course, I saw the establishment saying things like anti-vax conspiracies or like it was crazy to read these stories about you because I actually looked at the story. I looked at your Instagram posts, and there were elements of the media saying he was pushing anti-vax conspiracies or was refusing to get the vaccine, and that was totally wrong. So, long story short of it, you get fired after 14 years. Let's just have you tell the story that everyone's dying to hear, I guess.
All right. Yeah. I mean, basically, you know, spring 2021, you know, we put out a new record. And so we spent all those months in the spring. I was out in LA with everybody interacting, totally fine, recording music videos, promotional stuff, all through May. Everything was fine, no issues. And then in June, all of a sudden, like COVID protocol controls, whatever you want, kind of comes to a head. And I get a phone call from their manager. It was just the most like unnecessarily abusive, threatening call I've ever received. Like just screaming at me of, you know, you need to do this. And I was like, well, you know, I talked to my doctor about it. I have a medical exemption and didn't care, didn't matter. Like he just made it perfectly clear.
So this is... what do you say, May of 2021?
Yeah, well, this was June. So last time I went out there was May. So.
But when did the demands, was it the first time they said, get your vaccine?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't, it wasn't a secret that I was not, you know, lining up to do this. And, but like to just get this, I just assumed we were going to have a conversation about like, hey, here's my feelings, here's, where I'm at with things. And it was just, this phone call was just like, this was a new manager. I don't even know this guy.
But there was no conversation before this? Like they didn't come to you and say, hey, look, man, you really got to get the vaccine?
I had like gentler conversations with them about like my feelings and my thoughts, where I was at, and my medical, history and my concerns about, going into this. And the last we left it was, all right, sounds like we're going to have more conversations about this, to be continued.
Yeah.
And then
like it didn't feel definitive. They didn't.
No, it felt like we had opened a conversation that was going to keep going. And then a week later, out of nowhere, I get this call that's just, annihilation. And it was just, so he made it very clear by the end of that conversation that I was to get the shot or I was out.
Wow.
And, it
was clear. Like he said, get the shot or you're out.
Yeah, that was the gist of the whole conversation. And so I wrote to the band that night and said, again, listed off my feelings on everything, but also pointed out like, hey, you can fire me over this. I get that, but you should know this guy's representing you. He's abusive, threatening. And if he's being like this to me, I can only imagine how he is treating the crew. And, because
you were in the band.
Well,
like you're not the original Offspring drummer.
I'm not the original Offspring drummer, but I'm basically I was a salaried position to be the drummer in the band.
Yeah. Well, so when I pull up the Offspring on like the Pandora or like streaming services, you're still in the pictures.
Yeah.
It's just so insane. I mean, how long has it been since they kicked you out? Like a year or something?
Year and a half.
Year and a half. You're still in their promotional material. Like maybe not like the new stuff they're making now, but we were driving in the car and we have like the heads up display thing turned on. I put on like 90s rock or something. And when it played an Offspring song from the 90s, the image was a white picture of you guys with you in it. Yeah. And I'm like, I said to my girlfriend, I was like, hey, look, it's Pete. I was like, it's so weird. Why don't they change that?
Well, I mean, honestly, that's an industry thing. Like there was plenty of times where we'd go on tour and I'd been there for 10 years and you show up at the venue and there's a picture of like the original 4 guys.
Really?
Like, it just happens. Like, but you can't control what some promoter or somebody's going to grab and throw up. And so,
I guess, but that is kind of weird. You'd think like a band would be like, dude, that guy's not in the band anymore. But so anyway, so you get this call from the manager, and it really is crazy at this point, in my mind, how the vax mandates are basically gone, the mask mandates are basically gone, and it's almost like people have forgotten just how fucked up it really was.
Yeah.
Like people kicking you out of businesses, bands kicking out after 14 years. So you didn't just decide one day, you're like, I'm not getting that vaccine. You actually talked to a doctor. Like that was the big deal, is that you had a medical risk or something?
Yeah. I have a history of Guillain-Barré syndrome, but I think a lot of people take my medical exemption and they like to point at it and go, look, this guy had a legitimate excuse to not get it and blah, blah, blah. But to me, it's like I'm not looking to carve out a space for me here. I don't feel there's any reason to, if you don't want to get the vaccine, any reason is legitimate to me.
Yeah.
It's not my medical exemption. All that did was not accepted. And all that did was show that those don't matter.
I think your story, well, one thing I'll say for me, it was particularly impactful is because The Offspring is basically the first band I was ever introduced to in terms of like music. Obviously, my mom had Zeppelin and Grand Funk Railroad and classic rock stuff, Three Dog Night. So I of course, CCR, we can name all the classic rock stuff. But when I was a kid, the first album I ever got was Americana.
Right.
So
and then that's your own. You're like, oh, this is my music.
Yeah, it was like my friends introduced me to The Kids Aren't All Right when that song came out. And then obviously Pretty Fly for a White Guy was big, and Why Don't You Get a Job? And so I had played drums initially since I was like 7 years old. My friends needed a guitar player, so I got a hand-me-down guitar from the family, it was my brother's. And the first song I ever learned to play was The Kids Aren't All Right. And I was like, my guitar teacher was trying to get me to learn to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. And I was just like, this does nothing for me. Right. I want to play this song. And he was like, okay, fine, but you're not going to know how to play it. And I'm like, if I'm going to go home and practice, it's going to be this song,
it's
right?
It's something I care about.
Yeah. So anyway, I hear this story, and what was shocking to me is for one, that caught my attention. Like when I heard this, I'm like, I play the Offspring in the skate park all the time. Like still one of my favorite bands, but now ideologically one of my least favorite bands.
Yeah.
Not only did you have, so there's three factors. Obviously, I like the Offspring. One is people should make their own medical decisions.
Yes.
They shouldn't be forced to do it. The second was you actually had a medical issue, which made it particularly egregious for them to try and force you to get something which could hurt you. And then the third huge thing was you're playing music with them for 14 years, and it seems like they just snapped their fingers and erased you from their lives without a thought. It was crazy to me to hear a story, because how do you do that to someone? Even if you were like some virulent anti-vax conspiracy theorist as they try to claim, I could, if one of my friends of 14 years came to me and started saying crazy stuff, I'd be like, dude, you need to sit down. Like we're gonna work you through this, buddy. Right. I wouldn't be like, get out of my house,
Yeah, I mean that was the worst part of it for me, was that because we had a lot of good years together. Like, had a great time. Like traveled the world. Our kids grew up together. Our wives were really close, and so the hardest part was just overnight that we were just gone. Not just hard for me, but for my whole family. Like to explain to my kids, like, oh, we're not going to see these people anymore, and just to never hear from anybody again was, over one issue. Like it's strange.
That's not even an issue anymore.
Right, that's not an issue anymore, but at the time, apparently, it was the only issue.
So what were they saying, that venues wouldn't let you in or something?
Yeah, I mean, it was like, well, there's venues that aren't going to let you in. And I'm like, well, what venues? Well, we don't know yet. Okay, well, there's borders you can't cross. Well, what borders? Well, we don't know yet. I'm like, well, that's my point. We don't know yet. Like, this seemed a little early to jump, but, through the fall of 2021 was just U.S. dates, festivals, and stuff. And there was no show that I could not have done on that tour, even just with my medical exemption. I had bands reaching out to me from the same festivals going, we're not vaccinated. We're on the same show with your band. There's no reason, like, this is stupid. Why are you not here? This doesn't make any sense. But
that's so weird.
I think the whole industry, though, went into this mode of everyone wanted to get back to work. And I don't begrudge anybody needing to get back to work and make money. But the fact that everybody was performing caution was alarming. Like, it was just, I know big tours that when someone got sick in the crew, big tours that were mandating everyone have this, the crew member gets sick, they don't park them in a hotel for 2 weeks and quarantine them. They put them on a plane knowing they tested positive and send them home.
Knowing on the plane they could spread it, make it worse. They just didn't care because it was all about them.
We're not paying for this. We're not. It wasn't about protecting people. It was about protecting profits.
When did you? So had you been playing shows up until that point?
Well, we hadn't done any shows since March of 2020.
Wow. So it locks down, and then you're basically just.
We were in South America when everything hit, and we kind of had to get out.
Wow. Where in South America?
We were in Chile. So
that sounds crazy, dude. What happened?
So we had gone down. We were in South America like the previous October, and a show got canceled for I forget why. But so we went down to make up a show. There was like some political
Santiago
rioting or something going. Yeah, there was like when we were there in October, it was like the anniversary of some political thing. And don't quote me on it, but
oh man, in Chile.
Yeah, and they were like, yeah, maybe we're not going to do this one. So we're like, okay. So we went back in March to make up that show. And then, if we're going all the way down there, let's do a couple more shows. So we get down there, we make up, or we're supposed to do an acoustic show. The COVID thing is just starting to hit. This is around like 15th of March, right?
Yeah.
And the acoustic show gets canceled. But we still have a regular rock show the next night. So we're all there and just kind of like, nobody knows what's going on. It's sketchy, and we're looking at the tour manager. He's got flights on hold, and like, what are we going to do? And then we go forward and we play the show, and it was just, it felt weird to play the show and look out and there's like 5,000 people sweating all over each other. And I'm just like, okay, like, I don't have any say in anything.
Yeah. What were you against it? Were you at that point kind of like we should?
No, I'm not going to say that I had any idea what was happening. It just, I think speaking for myself, it felt strange that we're playing the show, but
It was scary.
it was scary. Yeah.
For me,
just like, oh my God, what's going on? So after the show, like we were supposed to go to Brazil the next day. And I guess finally while we were on stage, they came to an agreement. The promoter was like, yeah, it's out. Everybody head home. But it sounds like if we had gone to Brazil, we probably would have gotten stuck there for like a month. That everything was like clamping down or locking down. And so we got out, got back home. But yeah, we hadn't played any shows.
I had friends that were in other countries too. And I was like, you need to come home now. It's not even about the severity of the illness, the disease. At the time, we were all really freaked out about it because we had these videos of people in China collapsing in the street.
Yeah.
So no one knew what the hell was going on. But I remember we had this little, our original studio for Timcast IRL was in the basement of my house in New Jersey. And then right across from it, we had a TV and a couch. And we wrapped the show and then turned the TV on. Or it might have been before the show, I'm not sure. And there's Donald Trump saying we're going to be stopping travel. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, out of or into the country is being suspended for certain people. If you're American, you can come in. And then I think it was to Europe or something like that. And at that moment, it felt really serious. And then we had a conversation with everybody in the house, like, we're in a peninsula, like New Jersey. There's a bridge to our left. And if shit hits the fan, we are on this peninsula. So we need to figure out if we need to be somewhere else, or do we bunker down, or do we buy supplies? Like, what does this mean? And it's crazy to think that we're past this now, and I do feel like most people have forgotten what March was like and that feeling of what was going on. I couldn't imagine what it would be like being on tour out of the country, just like, I guess we're going to keep doing our thing. And then eventually they're like, you need to go home.
Yeah.
So were you in Brazil?
No, we left from Chile.
Oh, okay.
Went home. So
where, like California, I'd imagine?
Yeah, I think I flew through Texas back to Tennessee. So that was usually either Texas or Florida. Yeah, so it was weird. But even on our way down there, my wife's like, "You guys really going right now?" Like, I'm like, I don't have a say. What do you want me to do?
Before you flew to South America.
Yeah, like it was already kind of bubbling up. Like,
right.
What's going on?
I did I covered the story in January of 2020 about this strange illness, and there's like a Chinese guy in a hazmat suit. YouTube was threatening to ban people for talking about it.
Right.
It was weird.
Yeah.
Every video about it got demonetized, and I'm like, what is this? What's going on? And then all of a sudden they hit me up like March, and they were like, no, we're bringing all your monetization back, and you're allowed to talk about it now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like whenever there's something you're all of a sudden not allowed to talk about, that just kind of makes my ears prick up of like, oh, really? Or
I know,
there's
like,
a
what's
person
going
that
on?
you're not allowed to listen to. It's like, oh, what now?
So what was it like after this? I mean, I imagine you guys are a big touring band. That's what you do.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you make your money is touring,
But now you're not.
Now you're not.
So what happens then? Like the lockdown happens, you're back in the U.S.
Yeah.
You guys just do nothing, or what?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was just home kind of sorting out, are we going to, we're just wait and see, right? We were supposed to go to Australia in April. That got canceled. And then, we always go to Europe in the summer. We had shows in probably end of May, early June. That's coming up. And we're like, wow, it can't go on that long, right? It's crazy. We're going to shut everything down for 2 weeks or for 1 month. And then it was like, no, Europe's out. And it's like, oh, okay. So now that's happening. So
business is done. And for us, our revenue tanked in March and then slowly started to climb back up. And that was a scary thing. I was like, oh, wow. We do this show, we do this YouTube stuff, and we were making money, and then all of a sudden we weren't. For us, we were fortunate enough that the podcasting space, everybody's locked in their houses, so they got nothing else to do. Yeah. So they're listening to shows like this. So let me ask you, man, you're wearing a black hoodie, and you've got, I guess, what is that, like plaid, what would you call that, plaid pants?
Yeah.
Plaid. You got a mohawk, I guess. Is that a faux hawk? What is that?
I don't know. It doesn't go all the way down the back. It's more of a Peaky Blinder, maybe?
Peaky Blinder?
Sure.
So you're like a punk rock guy.
I mean, by default.
Did you like how did I'm asking these questions because I wanted to get into the how anti-punk rock everything's become, but I'm curious just the context of like what's your background growing up? You've played in a bunch of other bands. How did you get into punk?
I fell into punk rock. I grew up in upstate New York, about an hour south of Rochester, in a little tiny town called Arkport. And there's about 1,200 people there. I had 23 kids in my high school graduating class. And so where I grew up, you had whatever you could get on the radio, and if you were lucky, you could get a station from Rochester that was playing more rock music. But so I grew up on like metal, like 80s rock, 80s metal.
It's cool though.
Anything that was my thing. I loved that. And, I had a drum set. My dad had got me a drum set when I was in 6th grade, and I didn't do much with it. I didn't think a lot of like, oh, you can make a career of this. You didn't think of that stuff in that town. But when I was in high school, I had a band because some guy came up to me in the hallway at school one day and was like, "Oh, you got a drum set. There's a new kid that moved to town. He plays guitar. We're gonna form a band. We're coming to your house because you're the only person with a drum set in town." So it was like, oh, okay,
there you go.
So we started playing, and as pretty terrible, and just trying to figure it out and put a couple beats together.
How old were you at the time?
This was probably 14, 15. And
how old are you now?
49.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so when I was 16, a friend of mine dragged me out because there was like my tiny town, and then there was the town next to us with about 10,000 people in it. And that's where my dad was a music teacher. And so there was this band from that high school that was playing, and my friend dragged me out, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go. And here's this drummer that was playing exactly like everybody that I saw on TV or MTV, and like all the stuff that I was like, oh, I couldn't do that. I had a block. Yeah. And I'm looking at this guy just shredding, and I'm like, oh, like light switch went off. I'm like, well, if he can do that, I can do that. And I go home and I said to my dad, I'm like, you have a drummer in your band named Mick Palmisano? And he's like, oh yeah, he's a really good drummer. I'm like, why have you never mentioned this person to me? And my dad, bless his heart, he goes, what? You've never been very serious about it. And he's like, he's a really serious drummer. So I meet Mick, and long story short, like the next day I just start practicing. Like I'm like, he can do it, I can do it. I'm working on everything and, improving by leaps and bounds, and get to be friends with him. And he's moving to LA to go to music school. And and I'm like, I want to go to LA and go to music school. So a year later I moved out there with him. And,
wow.
Went to, I went from teeny tiny town to Hollywood, sight unseen, had never been out there. We drove out together, and we get to LA, and I'm just like terrified.
How did you end up playing? I mean, I'm watching this video the other night, Killboy Powerhead, and there's got to be like, I don't know, it looks like 30, 40,000 people. It was just massive.
Yeah.
Like, how do you just show up in Hollywood, and then how did you get from there to there? You know what I mean?
I mean, that my buddy kept me alive. Like, I got there, had no idea what I was doing. Like, we'd go to the grocery store, he'd put something in his cart, I would put the same thing in my cart. And he's finally,
I'll eat whatever you eat.
Yeah, and he looks at me, he's like, okay, because he was a year older than me, and he'd already been there. And he's like, all right, I get it. And like took me under his wing, like showed me how to survive basically, and got me through school. So I go through music school, I get out of there, and then I start, bussing tables and, trying to play in bands. I was in a few different bands, and I was roommates with Ray Luzier, who's the drummer for Korn now.
Oh, wow.
But he was one of my teachers at school. And so we got to be buddies, and he's like, hey, I need a roommate when I graduate. And I was like, okay, great. So move in with him. And he was real busy drummer, so he was kicking me down stuff that he didn't have time for or didn't work in his schedule. So I started playing with a few groups that way, and, did that for a few years. And I'm working at this rehearsal studio, and the band Face to Face comes in, and the punk rock band, right? And I don't know anything about punk rock, and they're there auditioning drummers, and I'm just like, oh, whatever, it's not my thing. And they get a guy and go on tour, and a friend of mine ended up tour managing them on the tour, and he calls me up a few days on the tour, and he's like, what's the matter with you? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, this band was just auditioning drummers under your nose and you didn't play with them. He's like, you're an idiot. I'm like, well, I don't know punk rock. And he goes, well, he's like, yeah, I know they're punk rock, but they're looking for a rock drummer. They want to make a different record. They just borrowed this guy to do this tour. When they get off the road, they're auditioning more people. I'm putting you on the list. And I was like, okay. So they come back in to the studio, and I don't have any money, so I just went into I got keys to everybody's room. I go in, I stole their live record out of their merch box and learned the whole album, right?
That's one way to do it.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, all right, let me figure it out. So, you sit there listening to all these drummers audition all week, and, and everybody's playing the same 2 songs, and you're like, okay, well, that guy's pretty good. Oh, you can do the fast stuff. Oh, that's not, the slower stuff, he's not doing too well. And then they get down to me, and so I walk in, and I can see it on their faces. They're like, holy shit, we've gone through all these people, and now the kid that parks the cars is coming in. Awesome. And we sat down, and I'm like, hey, you guys been playing these same 2 songs all week. Do you want to do something else? And they're like, yeah, like, what do you know? And I was like, I know your live record. We can play anything off of that. And so they bust into a song, hop right in, play through that. They bust into another song, play through that. And then we stop, and the guitar player looks at me, and he's like angry. I'm like, oh shit, like, I must be doing terrible. And he's like, the hell's wrong with you? You made us sit here all week auditioning all these people, and you knew you were going to come in here and do this. Like, what the hell? And
it must have been so refreshing for this band to just kick into a song and you go right into it, and then I got to think about it.
Yeah, and it was a good fit, like, personally, and like, I still love those guys. I went and played with them last year. It was awesome. Their drummer had appendicitis out of nowhere.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, we've got 3 shows with Jawbreaker coming up. We can't rehearse. And I hadn't played with them in like 18 years. They're like,
wow.
Can you just come in and, learn a couple of our new songs? We'll play the old songs. And I was like, yeah, that'll be fun. So
cool. Well, how old are you when this happens?
With Face to Face, I was 23.
So you're 23. I mean, you're not even into punk rock.
No, I didn't. But when I listened to their record, I was like, oh, okay, this is like, it's kind of like heavy metal, but you play it with 1 foot instead of 2. Like I get it. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
And that was one of the things they liked, was because I'm a tiny person, but I hit really heavy. And so for me, even playing fast stuff, I can get that crack on the snare drum, and that's what they like. They're like, okay, usually when we get someone playing fast, the faster the song, the quieter the snare drum gets. And they're like, yours doesn't stop. I'm like, yeah, it's just, everything's got to be about that
How
crack.
long did you play with Face to Face?
I was with them from 98 to we broke up the band in 2004. And then the last couple of years that I was playing with Face to Face, I had also joined a band called Saves the Day. And so I was doing both bands at the same time, which was it was a lot. It was like...
I never listened to Face to Face. My friends all listened to Saves the Day.
Mm-hmm.
And when your story dropped, I had people being like, dude, that's the guy from Face to Face. Holy crap, what the... For me, it was like the Offspring. I'm like, man, I go skating in when I'm not skating outside, one of the songs on rotation was "The Meaning of Life."
Mm-hmm.
It's like, man, Ixnay and the Hombre. There's so much of that old Offspring stuff that I just love so much. Breaks my heart to hear what happened. But well, let's move forward. How do you end up with the Offspring?
So in 2007, I ended up leaving Saves the Day. Like, I loved that band, and we had put out a record that their fans really hated, and then kind of went back and made a record that I was really proud of, that I thought was really good, trying to kind of get back in good form with the fans and stuff. And it was really hard. And sometimes in bands there's a lot of drama, and eventually the drama there outweighed my love for the music to the point where I left. And I was so bummed out and dejected about music. I was like, I told my wife, I'm like, I don't want to play music anymore. I'm done with this. I'm going to go work at Costco. I'm going to go be a paramedic. I'm going to go do anything else. And she's like, yeah, okay, sure. Why don't you just take a break for a minute, And so kind of hung out for a couple months and got called for this bigger metal band was looking for a drummer. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. I want to play some metal. I'm tired of punk rock. I don't want to do this anymore. And then my buddy, my best friend, called me up, and he was a guitar tech to the Stars, and he's like, hey, I know that band. You're not joining that band. Like, absolutely not. Like, you think you had drama and Saves the Day.
Oh, man.
Like, do not do that. He's like, we'll find you something better. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. And at the same time, I get a call about go audition for the Offspring. And I'm like, I don't want to play punk rock. I don't want to do it. So I just ignored it. And then come back around about a month later from somebody else, like, hey, Offspring's looking for a drummer. I'm going to put your name in. I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm not doing punk rock. Comes back around a third time. And my wife is finally like, hey, why don't you just go and meet them? And she's like, I know you're still sore about punk rock and whatever, but why don't you go and get the job and then decide if you want it or not? And I was like, all right, that's pretty good advice because my wife's pretty smart. And so I go down and I meet with them, and it made sense. And so I go back down for I think I had 4 auditions with them. And I'm living up Northern California in Chico, where my wife is from. And so I'm flying down every time they want another audition. And so I go down and play 2 songs. Seems good. They call, come back next week, play these other 4 songs. Okay. And then every time I'm coming back down, I'm seeing like all these other drummers, and some people are on the first 2 songs, some people are on 4 songs. Like they are leaving no stone unturned looking for people. And I get in there, and this one guy, I'm sitting in the hallway and listening, and I'm like, oh wow, this guy is shredding. This is great. And I'm like, sounds familiar, but I don't know. And then they get to the fast song, and I was like, oh, not a punk rock guy, not his thing, but still really good. And the door opens, and it's my old roommate, Ray Luzier, who walks out, and he's sweating. He looks at me. He goes, oh, of course you're here. He's like, oh, this isn't my thing, whatever. And then at the same time, the Korn gig was floating around, and I wanted the Korn gig.
Oh, wow.
But I couldn't.
I like Korn, too. That'd be great.
Yeah, I was like, I want to play some metal. Like, that's going to be awesome. So, at the same time, I end up with the Offspring gig, which made sense for me. He ends up with the Korn gig, which was perfect for him. So, but it was really funny. Like that's how you bump into people.
So we get through this portion of, how you make it to this point and punk rock and all that stuff. And the reason I wanted to fill in that context is the self-titled album from the Offspring has a song called Kill the President.
Mm-hmm.
And they got rid of it, I think, in like 99. When they reissued the album because, when you're more, I don't know, underground punk rock, you do songs like that. And then when you're mainstream, double platinum, triple platinum or whatever, maybe you don't say kill the president. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was very obvious to me, even as a kid, I get introduced to Americana, the first album from my first album from them, which then instantly I buy Ixnay. Which then instantly I buy Ignition. And then I never bought the self-titled. My friends had that one. And then we're like listening to this being like, oh, these are the roots of this band that we're all big fans of. And I'm like, my friends like, they got rid of the song. You can't get it anymore. And even now it's like hard to find. You have to find like old YouTube clips.
Like a YouTube rip or something.
Like the song's there. It's just crazy to me that you get this guy who goes from writing a song called Kill the President, which like, I'm going to get in trouble for even saying the name of that song on YouTube. And in the Americana album, you've got The Kids Aren't All Right, which is like a song lamenting the end of tradition, basically.
Yeah.
And you get Why Don't You Get a Job? And so now I talked about this before the mandate stuff, before the vax mandates. I'm like, this is like a conservative punk rock band almost. Like, why don't you get a job? What is the punk in this band? They're telling you to go work hard. And I'm like, I dig it. You know what I mean? And The Kids Aren't All Right, saying like kids are doing drugs and hooking up. What the hell's going on? And that was that was the message I got from a punk rock band when I was like 12 or 13 years old. What's crazy to me is you mentioned that when you're doing these shows, there were other people playing who weren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
But they fire you. The punk band fires you. And it feels like that was the ultimate stake in the heart of like, this is not a punk rock band. They're not standing up for principles. I don't think they believe in anything. Not that I thought a mainstream successful pop punk band was like the most political and like ideologically driven. But man, that was really like getting, I don't know, like my childhood was smacked in the face. Because I at least thought the message of why don't you get a job was like, yeah, man, don't leech off other people. You don't got to, that wasn't necessarily a pro-establishment thing. The Kids Aren't All Right. That was big. And it was like, work hard, be good, be a good person. But now it just feels like the ethos behind the band when I heard this story was, fuck it all, I want to get paid.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to unfairly single them out as like the poster children for what happened. Like they drew the short straw of that I was willing to say something. This was happening everywhere. It's not
The
special
lockdowns
to
and stuff.
no to what leaning on people for the vaccine. Like the industry was mandating that, everyone from the promoters down, promoters put pressure on the tour managers, put pressure on the bands, put pressure on the crew. Like everybody had to do like it was saying, like performing caution, but we're protecting profits. We're not protecting people. Every band was doing this, but a lot of other people in my position just kind of like, left or were replaced and didn't say anything because it's, there's loss of, oh, I don't want to lose other opportunities. I'll just leave quietly, right? But for me, when we made our statement, it was threefold. Was number one, I didn't want to have the same conversation individually with all my friends and family and people. Like, they're about to go on tour. I'm getting hit up for tickets to these shows that I know I'm not going to be at.
Wow.
And so I'm like, well, I don't only want to have this conversation once. But number two, it felt like somebody needed to say something about what was happening. Because if I'm getting squeezed here, then everyone's getting squeezed here. And it's not a personal thing. It's a business thing. Like everybody wants to make their money, right?
Yep.
But so I'm like, well, if I don't say something, someone's got to start the conversation. And I also wanted anybody else who was in my position to know that they weren't the only ones going through that. Like, how do you find your people if nobody puts themselves out there like, oh man, this happened to me? And as soon as we did, we get inundated, my Instagram, with messages from people from everywhere and all walks of life, lots of musicians, actors and stuff, but nurses, doctors, people from everywhere going, I'm in the same position,
But were they unwilling to speak up?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't begrudge anybody for not speaking up. Like I don't recommend it. Like it's not for the faint of heart. Like people are like, what does it cost you? It costs you everything. Like,
yeah, but I understand.
And and everybody says, oh, why didn't you get a fake card and stuff? I know plenty of people working on fake cards, and I'm twofold on that issue as well. I don't have a problem with someone doing we're all in an impossible situation, and whatever anybody needs to do to take care of themselves and their family, they should do it. But would it be nicer if more people spoke up? Sure, it certainly would help. But both things can be true for me.
Well, this is what bums me out is I'm a little kid. I get this album, the Americana, and the tab book. Mm-hmm. I get this Squier Fender guitar, and I start learning about Dexter Holland, the lead singer, founder, I guess, OG, him and Noodles. And he's working on a degree in microbiology. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, this dude's sticking it to the man, succeeding in the industry. Like in this space, he's criticized, and also working on a degree. I'm like, as a little kid, I was like, that's so cool. He's a cool guy. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say like he was a role model or anything like that, because I didn't really have anybody that I looked up to and had posters of. It was just like, that's really cool. We need leaders. I understand what you're saying. A nurse, a drummer, somebody who's trying to get by and protect their family and live their life is in a difficult position. What can they do?
Right.
If they speak up, what's the impact they can have?
Right.
If the Offspring, multi-platinum, decades of success in the industry, still to this day, the most sales for an independent album. I'm pretty sure Smash, right?
Yes,
It's never
like
been
15
beaten.
million. It'll never be beaten.
And it'll never be beaten. This is an indie release that will never be beaten. And if anyone could have spoken up and said, don't fuck with us, it could have been him. It could have been the Offspring. He's rich already. He's got fuck you money. And he could have done, man, if he was worried about staff, employees, and he didn't want to be a leader, he could have said, I get it, Pete. This sucks. We're not going to let you down. If the venues don't let you in, we're going to have to get somebody else, but we're here with you the whole way, right?
Right.
You could have kept the job. You could have been doing the studio stuff. I mean, 14 years, does that mean nothing? So I'm like, the bare minimum could have been like, bro, we will take care of you. Don't worry about it. We are wealthy, successful, famous rock stars. Couldn't even do that. What I would expect, if it were me, if I had that kind of pull and I'm playing a show and you're the Offspring, you say to the promoter, I wonder what the headline's going to be when one of your top bands pulls out because of what you did to our drummer. Make your choice. We needed, excuse me, any leader. Because what you're saying is true. Everybody's getting leaned on. Everyone's getting pressure. They're going to each and every person, every band. And I've said it over and over again. If one rock star, if one band, one headliner said, we will pull out, we will force a refund, we will breach the contract, go fuck yourself. Those venues would start sweating bullets.
Well, the thing was, there was a handful of people that did that. You know, like you got Eric Clapton, I'm not going to play segregated audience. You've got people like John Rich and Kid Rock, but even somebody like Dorothy. I don't know if you know her. She's like a metal rock singer. She was, you know, to me, like her stand, she's like, I'm not forcing anything on my crew. We're not playing shows that force it on the audience. Like for somebody of that size to really put it on the line where it would cost her something, like to me that meant a lot. Like I think she's really cool.
That's awesome to hear. I mean,
yeah. And so if these people, if somebody hadn't started pushing back a little bit, I'm sure there's more. That's off the top of my head. That's all I got. But you know, I don't know where we'd be right now. Like I saw the protocols on one of the biggest tours that went out in, I guess it was 2021. And I saw a friend of mine was a tech for one of the bands on it and emailed me the specs that the crew received. And it was insane. It was like multiple bands on the bill. Each band is in their own bubble. They will not interact with the other bands. Inside your band bubble will be broken up into smaller bubbles, like the band itself travels in one bubble. The crew is in a bubble. Inside the crew bubble, if you are stage left, that is your bubble. These are the people that you interact with. Your bubble will move through the backstage areas together. And it was crazy. I'm like, it's hard enough to be on tour already and to be boiled down to here's the 4 people you're allowed to interact with for the next 2 months while you're on. Like, I'm like, it just sounded like prison to me. I'm like, how is anyone enjoying this? I understand people want to make money. I get that. But, it's hard to be on tour. Like, not boo-hoo, oh man, I traveled the world. But, you're away from your family. A lot of it is, you've got the hour or 2 that you're on stage every night, but then you got to fill the rest of your day. I mean, people think everyone gets into drinking and stuff because it's a party, but it's like, oh man, it's lonely.
And heroin.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you don't start heroin because you're having the best time on the road. And
exactly.
I think that's a hard thing for people to square. Is like, well, you're traveling the world and this and that, and it's like, yeah, but you're basically isolated and by yourself. And so now with COVID on top of all of it, you're isolated even more. And
people don't understand, man. They equate seeing your show and that good feeling they get. They assume you have that feeling.
Right.
I get it. You go see a performance, you go see your favorite band, they play your favorite songs, you're singing along, you're cheering, and they're like, hello, Chicago. And you're like, yes, this is awesome. You think that feeling you have is the feeling they have, but those guys on stage are like, I have played this song every day, sometimes multiple times, said the same things to the audience every single time. This is the 13th time I've sung this song this week.
Yeah.
So they don't have that feeling.
Yeah.
They're away from their families. They're working. And it's like, and that's the thing too. I mean, I write songs, full disclosure for everybody who's listening. Obviously, we've done songs together. We just filmed a music video, so we've got more songs coming out. It is an honor and a privilege, good sir.
Oh man, same
but
here.
I don't get that feeling from songs I write. The feeling that I get when I listen to a song from one of my favorite bands, I never get a feeling from my own song. I don't know if you feel similarly or.
Well, I think it's hard. I mean, to your point about, doing the same thing on stage every night, yes, you might be playing that song for the 1,000th time, but somebody in that audience is there for the first time. And so that's the mindset that I think most performers would go to is like, regardless of what's happening for me for the next 90 minutes, I'm turning that off because these people came to see a good show, and I'm gonna give them that. I might go back to my hotel room and cry myself to sleep later because I'm just having the worst week ever. But for now, my gig is this. Like, I think about like Broadway performers that, 8 shows a week. These people are not just like running through their set list, but they've got to emotionally get to the same place, sometimes twice a day on weekends with their matinee shows and stuff. And I'm like, I've got friends that do that work, and I'm just blown away by like, how do you emotionally go there every day over and over and get back to that, and then still just wake up the next day like, oh, let's go do it again. Like, it's any kind of performer. Yeah, there's repetition in your art form, but you got to find a way to make that fresh. Even if you're tired of it, somebody paid to be there to enjoy it. So you gotta find a way to make it enjoyable for them.
There's that Andrew Tate clip I reference periodically. He says, whether I'm happy or sad, doesn't matter. I got to wake up. I got to do the exact same thing no matter what.
Yeah.
And, aside from all the controversy around him, he's got good clips, and he's completely right about that. If you wake up and you're like, I'm sad, so I'm not going to work, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah.
And but that's the thing too, like the point I was kind of getting to with touring and doing rock and all that stuff and being a rock star. I've not done that, but I used to travel. I would be on a plane twice a week when I worked for Vice and when I worked for Fusion, flying around the world, going to stories. Sometimes we call them recce's, reconnaissance. It's like, okay, we got to go down to this area and meet some sources and see if the story's actually there. So I'm in random places with no friends half the time. But I was lucky enough to have Luke Rudkowski of We Are Change. He's been on the show several times. For him, it was like win-win. We've been good friends for a real long time, but he's like, I'll sleep on the floor of the hotel room you got, save money, and then we'll hang out. And, it worked in that I had a friend who was also doing something similar. Yeah. So I wonder if there was at least that when you're on tour, you'll see another band and you're like, oh, it's Jim, man. And you grab a drink and you hang out. And
those are the best days, because as much as you love your band and your crew that you see every day, that's why festivals are the best, because you're going to see tons of other bands that and people that you might only see once every couple of years. And so anytime you can bump into somebody, it's the best. It changes your attitude. Like my best friend, like I said, he's a guitar tech, and he'll just show up out of nowhere somewhere. We were playing a show in Vegas one night, and I'm like getting hit in the head with something, and I look down and there's like a pile of guitar picks on the drum riser, and I look over and he's just on the side of the stage, like I didn't even know he was coming, and he's just like flicking guitar picks at me, so it's like, and when he would have time off, he came out to tour manage Saves the Day. Like, he was working for Prince, and then left that, and I was like, hey, we need a tour manager, come out. And he's like, yeah, I'll come slum it with you guys so we can hang out. And that's when it's fun. Or we go on tour and we're playing a festival with Korn, and I get to see Ray. Or you see all these people that that lifts you up, that buys you a week at least, of like, oh, okay, yeah, this is fun again.
It's otherwise it's just repetition.
Man,
it's got to be brutal.
It can be a grind, but no complaints. You're traveling the world, but it's not what everyone thinks.
I hear you on the no complaints to an extent. You like, I don't know if I don't want to talk too much about money because it's people's private business, but it's not like you are a founding member of the Offspring who gets royalties and access to this deep cut of all the money they're making. I think what did they sell their the library for like $35 million or something like this?
Something like that, yeah.
And then there's tour money and the fees. You're getting paid a salary, so you're doing this really hard work. You're traveling around. It's repetitious. It's just a job.
Yeah.
And then you got to go on stage every day and see that like young person who's a big fan with glowing eyes being like, I can't believe it. It's Pete. It's Dexter. It's Noodles. Like, everybody's here. And you smile and wink at them, but deep down you're dead inside.
Some days it feels like that. But if you see somebody like that, then you're not dead inside anymore.
Right. That's what lights you up, huh?
The fans will light you up. Because you're seeing a new group of people every night, and it's like, okay, well, you owe it to these people too, even if you're having a shitty day. Like, suck it up, do your job, And as a drummer too, a lot of people, I think, don't understand, the drummer's aspect in a band. People are like, oh yeah, you keep the beat and back there. It's like, no, the drummer is running the show if he's doing his job right. Like
Yeah.
you are pacing, you're feeling out in between the song, like, oh, they're going to cheer a little more. They like that one. Like you are like, this person's going to need this cue for their transition, or sometimes somebody's going to turn around and be like, how does this song start? And you got to be like, oh, it goes like this. Or, you need to anticipate what everybody's needs are on stage. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. So shout out to my drummer friends that do their job. When you do it well, no one notices.
Yeah.
It's
and you got to
everything
do
is
tricks
smooth.
too. Do you like throw the drumstick in the air and catch it? And
When I was a kid, I've got a video that I've been trying to get my VCR to work, because I like played in this talent show when I was like 16, and I'm all like twirling sticks and hilarious, like stuff that I couldn't do now to save my life. But it was fun when I was a kid. But yeah, I mean, you're putting on a show, whether you're swinging back to the point where you're getting welts on your back because you hit yourself swinging back too far.
or hitting your hands when you're...
Yeah. Oh my God. I've lost this nail so many times because
brutal.
I hit rim shots, which is the stick is hitting the edge of the drum and the head at the same time. And sometimes I'm a little bit off and I catch the finger in between, and it just...
and you got to keep playing.
Yeah, you got to keep playing. I mean, and
So
then
you're like, you're on stage bleeding and you're just playing.
yeah, bleeding and it's throbbing, and you're like, in my mind, I'm like, great. Now the next 6 months, I've got to watch this dead nail grow out and like, so it's the worst. But
I actually have a gold medal in drumming. That's right.
from where?
I think I was like 8, and I started playing drums when I was like 7. And so when I went to a school called Our Lady of the Snows in Chicago, and they had a music program. So for me, it was awesome. I got to leave class abruptly in the middle of class to go to this weird little closet where me and 2 other kids would play snare drum, and we'd have like the music, and I would read music and just do snare. And then they had like a competition or something. I don't know. I went in a room and there were judges, and I played, and then they were like, you were the best. So I got like a little, I think my mom has it, like a little gold drumming medal. So, that means I'm better than you at drums.
I think you should have her dig that medal out, and you should wear it nightly on your show.
Like, look at me. I can play the drums. I can do real basic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for me, there was another kid in my school who played drums. And so another kid in my class played bass, and then the drummer kid's brother played guitar. And so we were talking, walking home from school one day, and I was like, I play drums. And they were like, oh, that sucks. We don't need a drummer. We need a guitar player. And so then I go home and I have this really nice drum kit. My mom got me like, not only was it like your standard kit, but she got me, I had a Zildjian Splash. So a little bit, better than just she gave me, a little bit more. And then I'm like, I don't want to play drums anymore. I want to play guitar. And then my mom's just like, she wanted me to play drums. My brother played guitar. My sister played keyboard. And then it turned out I was the only one who did anything, and I played guitar. Then this band, I go to my friend's house, and he's like, listen to this. And he like puts in Americana. And then it's, what is the first song on Americana? Is it Have You Ever, I think?
Yeah, it's Have You Ever. I'm like, blocked it out.
Yeah, right. And so then obviously the hits, everybody knew Pretty Fly for a White Guy.
Yeah.
So of course I knew that, but they're like, you gotta listen to the album. And then I was like, Mom, I gotta get this CD, and Mom, I gotta get this tab book.
Tab book, yeah.
And that was what started it for me. And then, of course, I wasn't cool listening to the Offspring because they're pop punk. Right. So then the other real punk rock kids in the neighborhood, they were listening to like The Virus and Anti-Flag, and even Anti-Flag was a little too poppy. They were like, but then Bad Brains, and all that stuff. So that was it for me. And then around the time I think 18 years old, everybody had like an evolution into indie rock, post punk, and stuff like that. And so then all of a sudden, we were all no longer listening to The Offspring or Bad Religion. Somehow it turned into Death Cab for Cutie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like way, I don't know, what's the right word, sissier? Like,
yeah, dude, I love Death Cab for Cutie. The photo album, when I first heard that, I was like, what is this? Like,
yeah, cool stuff.
Really cool, yeah.
Yeah, so what do you think, man? I read a lot about the history of a lot of bands, and I'm also a huge fan of the Smashing Pumpkins, obviously, because who isn't? And I love Ava Adore, but it's very different from Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
Yeah.
And I was reading about how something to the effect, I don't want to speak too much on what I'm not an expert on or anything, but Billy Corgan, he makes this album. It's mind blowing. It's this double album. It's huge. All these songs on it are so amazing. And then they come out with this new album. It's very different. And it's because there's this belief that guitar music is on the way out.
Right.
But I hear that story from so many different bands where at some point this band got big, then believed, quote unquote, guitar music's on the way out, changed their sound, and then...
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go back 20 years ago. Rolling Stone every 2 years would have the cover of, oh, this band's going to save rock and roll. Like it was the Vines, and then it was, the Strokes. And so it was always like, you can't lift it back up if you don't tear it down. So it was like rock music, guitar music, it's on the outs, it's on the outs. Oh, it's back, now it's on the outs. Oh, now there's this new band. So I don't know.
It does kind of feel like, I don't know, in a down period, would you say?
I mean, it's felt like that for about 10 years.
Yeah. That's kind of weird.
Certain bands can put something out and it's going to cut through no matter what. But yeah, I don't know. It definitely got very synth heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like probably one of my favorite bands of all time is Metric.
And that band's cool.
Yeah. Their early stuff is kind of Pixies-ish, indie. I don't know how you describe it. Rock.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just know their bigger songs mostly.
Yeah, their modern stuff is more electric. Like their new album, Formentera, is very synth heavy. Like, and their past albums have been very, very, I don't know, I'd almost call it like indie pop, synth or something.
Right.
Whereas Combat Baby is kind of a grungy indie rock song, and that was a song that was I think like 2001 or something, and it was on the iPod. It was like a big release, I guess. I don't know. They're not the biggest band in the world or anything like that, but I think they're absolutely fantastic.
I played festivals with them before. They're fantastic live.
That's what I hear. Yeah. I hear they're like one of the best live shows to go to.
It was like, oh shit, okay, yeah,
yeah, that's cool stuff. But now, even the music we're doing. It's the weirdest thing because we put out a song, Only Ever Wanted, and people are like, it's a dated sound, it's old, and I'm like, I guess, but I don't care, man. I made a song, you don't have to like it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was kind of what, I guess, like the mainstream corporate narrative was, it's old.
Right.
And it's like, so what do we got to do? Do we got to do like a dance techno song to like fit the modern era or whatever?
I know. It just seems like everything needs to be pigeonholed and put into a box, and it's all so boring. It's like, oh, well, you can't have that sound because it sounds like 90s or whatever. And it's like, so what? It's music, it's art, it's subjective. You don't have to like it. But to say you shouldn't have done that is crazy to me. It's like you're an artist. You're making something. If somebody doesn't like it, that's okay. I mean, that's how it goes. You don't have any control over that, but I feel like as an artist, you should do what you enjoy. And yeah, there's a responsibility to the audience to an extent, but you also get to do what you want.
Yeah, especially if you've been successful and you just have fuck you money.
Yeah, dude, I've been through it twice with Face to Face and Saves the Day. Both bands, I came in on their fourth album. Both albums a big departure from their previous sound, and both times just polarized the audience. And, I think the Face-to-Face record, Ignorance is Bliss, it's looked back on now like, oh, damn, that record still holds up. It's cool. But at the time, it was very different than their punk rock thing. And, it probably should have been more of like a side project, but nobody did those back then. And we talked about it. We were like, oh, maybe we should put this out under a different name, and then we can go make a Face-to-Face record. But, record labels and things are like, no, you got to use your name and whatever. And then,
yeah, it's weird because the idea is like the brand will sell no matter what.
Right.
If you've got a big brand, you can put out an album that's just chicken bucks. People will buy it. They'll get pissed off, but you got the money.
Right.
It's like I remember when Pirates of the Caribbean 2 came out, Dead Man's Chest, and I think that movie's shit.
Yeah, that was tough.
The first one's awesome.
Yeah.
And so they were probably just like, who gives a fuck? Just slap it all together, slap the name on it, we make money. Yeah. And then they come out and they say, made even more money than the first one. Right. And I'm like, yeah, because the first one was good.
Right, but the lesson learned is
bad.
Not that making a subpar version made more money, let's make an even worse one.
That's all they keep doing.
Yeah.
And then they were like, we're going to do an all-female reboot, I guess, with like Margot Robbie. I just feel like everyone's fucking lost their minds. Yeah. But that is an interesting thing about how music goes. I was always fairly pragmatic when it came to music, in that I listen to the Offspring, and then I get into more skate punk stuff related because I'm skateboarding, and you get Bad Religion, and then the Tony Hawk 2 soundtrack obviously was huge. Everyone loved it. Goldfinger, Millencolin. And then, like I mentioned, like we're getting into the indie phase starts coming in. But I was always fairly like, look, man, pop music's fun. You can act like you're this cool kid who knows the secret band no one's ever heard of, but that's fine. If you're a fan of this indie band no one's ever heard of, and you're like, oh, I'm a fan of, the Paper Airplane Trio, you never heard of them, it's whatever. Mm-hmm. It's like, don't act smug about it. You're allowed to like what you like. But come on, pop music is fun. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like Taylor Swift is fun.
Absolutely.
Sia is fun. It's fun music. I think Sia is actually great. And Taylor Swift has got some good, it's fun music. So, I'm listening to pop punk stuff, the Decadence stuff, the Fueled by Ramen stuff. And there are a lot of people who are like punk purists who are like, punk is dead. They got mad at Green Day and all that shit. Mm. And it's just weird to me because it's like, do your thing, be original, build the culture, and then recognize what it is that people like about this pop stuff. But there is a kind of fear, I suppose, that there's the corporatization of the culture, which could kill it or rip its soul out.
Yeah.
And so, like, skateboarding, for instance, goes hand in hand with a lot of this punk stuff. Skateboarding in the 90s and the 80s was, my understanding, you were a weirdo. If you were doing this stuff, you were a goofy weirdo. Like, what are you doing? Then all of a sudden, Tony Hawk lands the 900, and now there's video games, and it's the coolest shit ever.
Yeah.
And then there was a fear that it would lose its core, and it would become corporate. Kind of did. You get these bigger companies coming in, but it still has maintained that kind of, skateboarding is still maintained to some degree of it, but now that it's Olympic, right. The Olympics were really scary. It was like, this is it. You're going to get kids in unitards being trained by, multimillionaire companies, and this rebel lifestyle is going to die along with it.
Yeah. Well, when anything gets a little too big, then it gets co-opted. You get corporations when there's money to be made, everyone comes in, and then the thing that you loved is changed because too many people start getting their fingers in the pot, and it's not what it was anymore. And that happens with bands, it happens with skateboarding. Poker, poker didn't used to be cool. And then all of a sudden 20 years ago, that one random dude won World Series of Poker. And then everybody's like, oh, poker's awesome.
Matt Damon did a movie about it.
Right. Yeah.
And
all of a sudden,
like,
the celebrity poker shows on TV and stuff. Yeah. And, same thing with comic books and Star Wars. When I was a kid, you'd get slapped around. Like, I love Star Wars. I still have all my action figures and stuff.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, OG Star Wars, but
yeah.
Oh man.
But I'm just saying, like, and nowadays it's like, yeah, of course, cool. No, yeah, it's fine. But you liked comic books when you were a kid, and you get beat up for that kind of thing. And now it's very mainstream.
It feels like it's hitting everything though. Like culture is stagnating. Everything feels corporatized and plastic and busted up. And I don't know I don't know, man.
Well, but everything is under only a few umbrellas. You can break it down into smaller companies, but it's all overtly owned by the same, big corporations. So everything gets, taken over.
All of this kind of goes hand in hand, I guess. Like the first story we're talking about with you and the Offspring and the corporatization of culture and stuff like that. I'm thinking about it, and it feels like you mentioned, should Face to Face put out an album that's just like their music, or should they have a departure? And then the label's like, just put it out under the brand because it'll sell. And that's what it feels like. It feels like, a band like The Offspring says, look, ain't nobody got our back, so we ain't got nobody else's back. Take the paycheck and shut the fuck up. And it feels like that's not unique to this one band. It's everybody is in the space where they're like every man for themselves.
That's everywhere. I mean, that
sucks.
That's the business. You've got to navigate, your way around. And for me, this was my first and last foray into just being like a featured player in a group where, I was always like a member of the band before. I was always writing and contributing and feeling creative. And, that's not always the case, and that's not always a bad thing. Like, at the time I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I don't have to have an opinion. I don't have to think. I just show up, I do my script and do my job, and that's cool. And it worked great for a long time. And then you get out of there and you're kind of like, oh man, I wasn't very creative at all. I didn't feel like I was.
Autopilot.
Yeah, and there's situations where, yes, you are paid for your ability on your instrument, but you're also paid for your ability to do what you're told. And that's a lot of gigs, and there's nothing wrong with that. Tons of dudes, that's their bread and butter. For me, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't think I would do that again. And, I didn't.
It's like you woke up or something. It's like,
yeah, because you get complacent. You're like, okay, yeah, I'm not contributing anything artistically here, but I get paid every week. So, and you get into that mode. So since getting out of there, I felt it's kind of been a resurgence of, working with you and doing drum tracks for people. Like I have a studio at my house where I just record all day and I'm creating, and it's kind of gotten me back to why I started playing music in the first place. Like why do I love the drums? Why do I love music and writing and creating? So for me, it's been really exciting on that front to just sort of have a rebirth, definitely a shift in my career from what I was doing. But, we had to find a new way forward. Like, I had to let people know, hey, I'm out of a job. I'm available. I need work here. Like I'm the only breadwinner in our family. Like my wife homeschools our girls. She has since my oldest daughter was 7, and I've always supported that. I think it's been great for when I was touring a lot. Like they didn't have to answer to any school or anything if they wanted to come out on the road. Like, and so that's just how our family has always worked.
Well, so you're the patriarch of the family, the breadwinner, and your
Right.
kids are homeschooled, but you're not a conservative guy, are you?
No, I'm not. And I think, it through this whole thing with the vax mandates and stuff, it feels like if there's a checklist over here on the left, and I always considered myself really progressive, right? And I definitely didn't feel like a conservative, and I don't have a problem one way or the other, but it feels like right now there's this checklist of all these purity tests that you've got to check every box. And as soon as you miss one, you're out entirely. There's no nuance. There's no middle ground. So I'm just like, oh, I don't think we should be mandating vaccines. And it's like, oh, well, you're crazy MAGA Republican.
Yeah.
And it's like,
you're alt-right.
well, yeah, you're all right. And it's like, well, I've got a lot of friends that are Trump supporters and stuff. I don't have a problem with that. Like, that's not a good insult for me.
And
like,
there it is.
Yeah. It's just like, I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote for Biden. I wrote in Bernie Sanders. Like I didn't feel like either of the options we were presented represented me in any way. So
Yep.
politically, I'm pretty marooned. I'm definitely leaning more libertarian than anything. But
It's crazy. There's this meme. It basically says, if you deviate from leftist economic positions, the left will not care.
Right.
If you deviate from their social positions in any way,
Right.
you are right wing.
Yeah.
So what this says is the left and the right is not about economics anymore. It's not socialist and capitalist. It's culture war. It's
Yeah.
do you march in lockstep with us or not?
And that's what I try to point out to some people that I know. Like for me, the siren started going off in 2020 or leading up to that, where everybody was, well, it's blue no matter who. And like we'd be in the primaries and we'd be trying to have conversations with people like, oh, who are you voting for? Who do you like? And it's like, doesn't matter, blue no matter who. We got to get Trump out. And I was like, but right now is when you get a say. Like, are you really telling me you're just gonna let the party pick your person?
Yeah.
And I naively thought that anyone had a choice anyway. But then watching Bernie just get completely railroaded, like media blackout until he dropped out, and then like, oh yeah, please come on and tell us about your endorsement of Joe Biden, right?
I know, right?
So, but I try to point out to people, I'm like, here's your list. Like, yeah, I didn't like this one, and I was lit on fire. Eventually, and the list is added to hourly. Like, eventually something's going to come up that you don't like.
Yep.
The same thing will happen to you.
Do you think this played a role in what happened with the Offspring? Like, were you this "don't make me defend Trump" guy?
I don't know about that. I mean, I didn't vote for Trump. And I'm not going to say how other people vote for things, but I'm not That's a tricky one there. I don't.
Well, don't
Yeah.
say what you can't say, but I'll tell you this. I think the Offspring guys are probably conservatives. I mean, like, probably neoliberal is a better way to describe them, not conservative. Establishment, but like, I've been saying this, man. They have a song called "Why Don't You Get a Job?" That's typically not a leftist perspective.
Yeah, I always took that song as very tongue in cheek, like he was just telling a story about his friend or something. So I don't know. I don't know that I would.
But the message, I mean, the kids aren't all right. How about Hit That? Like, come on, like, Hit That is a song about dating hookup culture being bad and how people need to stop doing it, basically, right?
Yeah,
Or
you could see it that way, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, for those that aren't familiar with the song, "Hit That" is it's about a guy who's sleeping around and having a bunch of kids, and a woman who's banging a bunch of guys and having kids, and then they're off just doing all this stuff, and he's like, "That's the way it goes." It sounds very negative. It's a very negative depiction of modern hookup culture. So, you like hearing songs like that, I'm like, these guys probably deep down, they probably come off to me as traditional, like, what's the right way to describe it? Neocon, neolibish. I don't want to say necessarily conservative because the way they treated you and the way they go about things, but I'd be willing to bet they're the kind of person who probably have somewhat conservative viewpoints, but are extremely self-interested to the point where they'll say whatever they have to say to make money and just get by. But you know,
Yeah,
don't say
I'm
things
not
you're
here
not
to
allowed
speak
say.
for anybody's
Yeah.
views or anything.
You're like, oh, let me
every-
tell you the secrets of no. You don't.
No, that's none of my business. So everybody's. Yeah, I can't speak for anybody but myself.
It kind of bums me out, this whole, not just what happened with you, but the whole thing, because it makes me feel like we're in this every man for himself situation. And it's like only are people pretending to care about each other. And if we're going to actually have something that is truly problem solving, it's going to have to be us building culture and creating a space where we're like, if you are a part of this culture and a part of this space, we do not put ourselves as like above everybody else to a certain degree. It's interesting. The cultural left or whatever, we say they're collectivist and the right is more individualist. But the way I view it is, you have to put community. You have to take your responsibility to the community seriously, and you have to recognize that it's not all about you. But at the same time, your rights start with you as the individual. Whereas it feels like with the left, or whatever you want to call it, I don't want to say left or right, but like the people who are like, fall in line and agree with us or you're fired, they're not striving towards anything. And it's dangerous. It feels like lemmings walking off a cliff.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. It feels like there's no middle ground and there's no nuance. It's like either you adhere to all of these things, or you will be branded as this anti-vaxxer, far right, Trump loving, and it's just like, it's just not. It's not an insult to me. Any of this stuff, it's just not accurate. Like, that's not who I am.
Did you ever see that clip with Jon Stewart where he was talking with Colbert about the lab leak? Mm-hmm. And Colbert was like, well, now, hold on there a minute. Mm-hmm. And Jon Stewart's like, the Coronavirus Research Center in Wuhan had a Brett coronavirus a few blocks away. And so he did, when the Department of Energy came out and said, lab leak's probably correct, the FBI came out, agreed. Yeah. And so these are just two agencies. But I mean, like, come on, the FBI and the Department of Energy oversees biolabs. Seems like, okay, well, there's some, maybe this is the case, right? As Seamus Coughlin put it, I love saying this, the city with the virus factory had a virus outbreak, and you're told you're crazy if you don't think it came from the virus factory. But Jon Stewart points out that they called him racist. They called him alt-right and conservative for suggesting lab leak may be the case.
Yeah.
And I feel like most people probably have experienced something to that degree. If in any way you disagree with the cult narrative,
they come for you fast.
But they call you a white supremacist, like a white nationalist?
I don't think I got called that. I did get called a Nazi from some real friendly messages from people who were wishing death upon me and my family. And
strangers?
Yeah, strangers. And that stuff is like, that's the easy stuff to shrug off. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't know you, buddy. But
what about friends?
That's the hard part, was the people that like immediately backed away from me and my family. Like that was hard. Like bands that I loved and traveled with just kind of
Fuck them.
yeah, not like, scorch the earth like I don't know him, but just kind of, backed away. But for me, yeah, that was brutal for me and my whole family. But the people that stuck around and the new people that I've met, like meeting people like you and Carter and working with you guys, like every time you send a new song, I'm excited because I'm like, oh,
I mean,
this is
dude,
gonna be fun.
we're lucky.
Yeah.
It's like my mom was laughing. She was like, I can't believe that the Offspring drummer is working with you guys, like, because she's like, you're 13 years old, with your Squire little $100 guitar playing Offspring songs, and now whatever is going on in this world serendipitously just ends up with like you sitting here and we worked on songs together. Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like the world must be a simulation, because how in the hell is that possible?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about, speaking out too, is like you find your people. Like,
Yeah.
I have a new band coming out this year with Dickie Barrett from Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Greg Camp from Smash Mouth, Johnny Rio from
crap.
Street Dogs, and Joey LaRocca from the Briggs. And
Supergroup,
right?
like the Traveling Wilburys.
Yeah, but it, I get a phone call from Dickie last April, and he's like, hey, saw your story. He went through a similar thing. He was the announcer on Jimmy Kimmel, got let go over vax mandate stuff.
Whoa.
And he's like, I feel like we should do something together. And he's like, do you know Greg Camp? And I was like, well, I know of him. And he's like, well, he lives in Nashville too. He goes, I don't know why. I think the three of us, like, that's how Dickie is. He's just like, I feel like this could be something.
You calling the band the Anti-Vaxxers?
Right, yeah, or Dickie Barrett.
I had to say it.
You just gave Rolling Stone their headline. No, it's called The Defiant. And so we just finished up mixing, and I'm hoping to get the record out this summer. But
Awesome.
it's rad. Yeah, I got to play some of it for you today.
Yeah, super cool.
But again, like reinvigorating my love for playing music and being a part of something. Like, and I was thinking, I'm always the drummer that gets brought in when someone's getting replaced. Like, I was not the original drummer in Face to Face. I was not the original drummer in Saves the Day. I was certainly not the original drummer in Offspring, right? Like, You're always filling in.
That wasn't even, was it Scott Welty? What was his name?
Ron Welty.
Ron Welty.
Yeah.
Scott, I don't know. But he wasn't even the original either, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's the only one on the records. There was another guy, James, before him.
Yeah,
way
and then
back
he
in the
like
day.
dipped out of the band, and boy,
Yeah.
was that a mistake.
Yeah, well, I think he's a doctor. I think he's doing fine. But
Yeah, people got to make the choices they want.
Yeah.
The Defiant
Yeah.
is your new thing.
yeah,
That's
so,
the thing, man. You speak up, and you, like you said, you find your community, because people are looking for allies, and people are looking for genuine people.
Yeah, and to me, it was painful when people like would walk away from you over this, and you're like, this is one issue. You've known me this long. Like, some of my closest people in my life do not agree with me on any of this stuff. They don't feel the same way about me at all, and we are fine. Like we don't have to agree on this. One thing doesn't have to ruin your entire relationship. Like you can have a mutual respect and not just be dismissive of someone.
This is the weirdest thing. When I'm a kid and I'm in Chicago, my family is from the city. Well, my parents are not from Chicago. They're my dad's from Texas, my mom's from St. Louis, and then a kind of a mixture of a bunch of places. But I grew up in the city, in Chicago. That's where I like in the city limits. We go to the suburbs for family events, and we're Chicago Democrats. We go to a family friend, and they're Naperville Republicans, and everybody gets along. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing you'd hear is like we'd be driving, and they would be like, "Well, they're Republicans," but and that's like as snarky as it would get. It'd be like we'd be talking about something, and then someone would do like a chuckle. We'd go there, their yard sign would have some Republican name on it. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
It was just like, well, that's their thing. And then we would have, cheesy nacho dip and drinks and whatever the family party was. Now it's like you get people calling you crying, like, why are you voting for Trump? What is that? And you're like, what is this? Like, isn't it really weird that it's like the people who voted for Trump are the less likely to have emotional outbursts over politics?
That's what I've found. I mean, there's this, I'm sure you've seen this meme, and there's like a stick people, and there's a guy standing in the middle on the line going like, well, I think both sides make valid points. and the blue person gets mad and pushes them over the line, and the red person catches them, and the blue person's like, "You're crazy," and the red guy's like, "Hey, you all right?"
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of been my experience here is, we have a lot of conservative friends. We have a lot of liberal friends. We've lost a lot of liberal friends. But
Well, they were never your friends to begin with then,
But I think, I mean, I would hope most people now, a year and a half later, seeing everything that's come out, are like, oh, all right, they're not crazy. Oh, they just felt differently about this. And to me, that's another hard thing about this situation is you're screamed at and called crazy and shadow banned and blacklisted and this and that. And then as more information comes out, then it's like, well, I feel like we've all said things that we regret. And it's
Yeah,
just like,
right.
I'm okay with it. So to me, I'm like, just own it. If you feel good about your stance on that, like, yeah, we're not going to work with anybody that won't do this thing, then that's cool. Then own that. But
I had a friend tell me recently, well, I think the COVID started with the wet market. And this was like 3 weeks ago. And I was like, really? I'm not gonna be mean, but after all this time, look, when the story first emerged, I'm the fence sitter guy where I'm like, look, give me proof, evidence. I don't want to make definitive statements unless I know for sure, because I don't want to come out and tell you something. No, this is it, and be wrong. But it's like you got a biolab in this city, and the virus emerges within a couple miles of it, and they tried claiming it was a wet market, and I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I mean, it's possible for sure. I'm not going to pretend to be a virologist or anything, but I mean, it sounds like it could have come from a lab, especially with the gain of function research stuff. Why is it that after all this time, someone would still try and maintain that position? Like sheepishly, I just don't understand. Do you really believe that? Because I kind of feel like, not to just go back into the COVID stuff, but I feel like a lot of people are just saying what they hope is the right thing to say around other people.
yes.
Yeah. Instead of just like, look, man, I'll say what I think, and I'll try to be respectful as much as I can, but
Yeah. I mean, in my experience from, the messages that I get online from people that are like, man, really support what you're saying, wish I could do the same. And it's kind of like, well, there's nothing stopping you. But
well, yeah. Did you see the story of Matt Strickland? We had him on Timcast IRL. He owns Gourmelts in Virginia, and I recommend everybody go to that if you're in the area. Amazing food. When the lockdowns happened, he said, these are unconstitutional. You can't do this. So no. They said, we will destroy you. And he said, bring it. And they shut him down. And just a few months ago, they surrounded his building. This is like the mandates are gone. They surround his building. All these different law enforcement officers come and they seize all his alcohol. And then he has to go to war over it. He ends up winning in the long run. He's like, how is this? This is Virginia. You got Youngkin as governor. How are they still doing this, coming after him, even though the mandates have long been done? And he says, I get phone calls from other restaurateurs and business owners saying, thank you so much for what you did. How can I help? And he says, speak up and stand up. And they go, oh, well, I can't do that.
right. I can't do that. I wish I could.
Wish I could, but you, Pete, you have to be the Spartacus.
Well, that's the thing. Like, dude, you know me, I'm pretty quiet. Like, I
Yeah.
haven't talked to anybody in a year and a half about anything. Like, I don't want to be the lightning rod for anything. My point was like, hey, I'm out of work. Does anyone need a drummer? Right. But it's like I said, I know it's not for everybody to come out and say like, hey, I don't agree with this. This doesn't seem right. It does cost something, and people are like, oh, I don't, everybody wants to be on board with like, I don't feel this is right, but nobody wants it to cost them anything. And it will cost you something.
I got to give a shout out to Mark White. I talked to him very briefly a while ago, but his story is very similar to yours. Mark White is the bassist from the Spin Doctors, and he got fired in 2022 for refusing to receive the COVID vaccine. I'm not so sure his full story though. Like let me see if I can find it, and I don't know. It doesn't really explain the full details, but it just says he split from the band February of 2022. I mean, I don't know how big the Spin Doctors are or anything like that. Like the Offspring, like we were saying earlier, have the most sold, like most highest selling independent album in history.
Yeah.
And it will like never be beat. That's like a big deal. Despite the fact that I don't think the Offspring is like Taylor Swift level or anything like that, but they still have that like, I don't know, is the Offspring in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
No.
No? I feel like they should be though. I mean, they're huge.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you have the biggest selling indie album of all time and you're not considered, but that stuff's pretty political.
But
So
yeah, the
you've
Spin
gotta really
Doctors
campaign.
aren't, like people know who the Spin Doctors are.
Right.
They have that one song, what is it called? I don't know.
Two Princes.
Two Princes?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But the funny thing about all of this is it felt like what scares me about modern culture, I grew up on superheroes, on Batman. Batman's a cool dude. Spider-Man, he's a cool dude too. And I am Spartacus, right? I am Spartacus. No, I am Spartacus.
Yeah.
And they all stand up together. And now what we have is, he's Spartacus.
Yeah.
No, he's Spartacus. No, I'm not. He's Spartacus.
Not me.
Don't look at me. And then eventually it's like this meek guy in the back who's like, I'm Spartacus, dude.
Yeah.
And then they all back away and say, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Yeah.
And then you get carried away, be burned at the stake.
Right. We're going to be over here continuing our lives as previously scheduled, but thank you.
I don't know how do you solve for that problem culturally? Because it feels like we have got I don't know how to describe it, a dead generation almost. And maybe it's this Strauss-Howe generational theory, the fourth turning. For those that aren't familiar, the general idea is strong men make good times make weak men make hard times make strong men. And we've had this period since the end of World War II where things have been moderately improving. I mean, Vietnam, the Cold War, all were relatively bad. Conflict in Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, etc. But then you get to this point in the late 80s with the fall of the Soviet Union where everything's just too good. Mm-hmm. Too good. And so we get this generation that grows up with everything being just as good can be. And you end up with everyone saying, why would I take any risks whatsoever?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable over here.
Yeah.
Like why would I want any of this to change? I just want, and I get people's reaction of the last couple of years. Like, fear will do a lot, and if it's ramped up and forced down your throat all day long, be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. Then yeah, you get to the point where you're like, I just want my life back. If this is what I have to do or this is what I have to take, I'll do it. Like, give me my life back. And it's like,
that's so weird to me.
Yeah, but now
I'm not so attached.
Yeah, but I want to look at these same people now and go, did you get your life back?
Yeah.
Like, has it changed? Or did you get anything that you lost during this period? Did it all come back? Because you checked every box.
It didn't work out.
You did what they told. Did you get it all back?
I mean, would you feel like you're doing better than ever at this point?
Personally, yeah. Yeah.
Like, it really worked out for you.
Yeah. Financially, no. I mean, you make that kind of money. Like, that's hard to recreate. But man, creatively, like, I feel like a new person. Like, every day I get up, I go down to my studio, I'm working on something. I'm writing songs, I'm tracking drums for somebody, like, all over the world. I did an EP with a guy from Australia. I just played a pop punk song for this guy from Italy that's in Italian. I don't even know what he's singing about. Did that the other day. Like,
what if it's like really bad?
What, the words?
He's like singing about the bringing back Mussolini or something.
Man, I hope not. I mean, it's a pretty major chord positive song, so that would be rough.
It would be a weird,
Mussolini. And I'm just back there drumming like,
bring him back.
Didn't know.
Yeah,
but working with Defiant, working with you guys, like, to me, it's like I didn't. Sometimes you don't realize how stunted you are creatively, or until you get away from something, and then you're like, oh, yeah, I guess there was a lot of good there, but there was a lot of ways that I felt incomplete or underutilized. And
like when you're playing with the Offspring, was it a lot, hey, here are the drums we want, play this?
Yeah, I mean, any situation like that, there's a bit of a script, and it wasn't like, don't color outside the lines at all. Like, but I was pretty good at knowing where I could put a little bit of myself in, and pretty good. And as a listener too, like, you don't want to pull the audience out of a song. Like, if they're waiting for that drum fill from that hit from 25 years ago,
yep,
and all of a sudden you throw in some Buddy Rich jazz fill, No, nobody wants that.
I hate that about live shows when the singers deviate. I can understand it when the singer there's like a part of a song with a high note and then they pull it low because they're stressed or strained or whatever. I get it. But I really just don't like the artistic, oh, I'm going to try a totally different melody. It's like, no, like the hook is what makes me like your song, man.
Yeah, don't pull me out of it. Yeah, I get that. And so I think there's a responsibility there. But yeah, when you're hired in that position, yeah, you stick to the script. You do.
Have you been following all this AI stuff?
I'm kind of fascinated by it, and like the implications for it musically, I don't even know.
That's what I was interested in, because you've got decades in the industry watching all this. We've already gone into the era of drum machines have been around forever.
For sure.
I think that was the thing with like the Smashing Pumpkins. They originally were playing with a drum machine, and then they had some guy be like, "Look, get a real drummer, and you guys are a hit."
Right.
But drum machines have been around forever, and they've been getting better and better. And now a lot of bands don't even use real drums because, what is it? Didn't you do a thing where like all of your drums can be purchased, like the sounds?
Yep. Yeah. So on splice.com, you can go and purchase my Pete Parada's Toolkit Pop Punk Sound Pack, which is 350 snippets and loops and different beats from that era, late 90s, early 2000s pop punk stuff, like that feel. So all different tempos, fills, feels. You can piece a whole song together. The Italian guy that just hit me up, he bought my sound pack and made the song, and he's like, "Hey, I'd like you to do a whole custom track. I like this." So, worked from there. But yeah, you can take that stuff. It sounds like I played on your song.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's so much stuff out there where you can, even there's single snare hits, tom hits. You can take pieces of my kit and put it together. It'll sound like me.
I think Carter did that.
Yeah.
So I don't know for which song, but some of the songs that we're working on are more produced in like a little bit of electronic and stuff. And so I'm pretty sure he takes the sound clip from you playing and then just
move it around.
Yeah, pastes it and edits it, and it's like making these hits that it sounds like you're playing, and he's playing for you. It's kind of crazy. So here's what I find interesting. Being a drummer, you've been experiencing the replacement of drums with drum machines for a long time, but now we're moving into AI voices. And we're getting really close to just literally replacing every member of the band. And we're probably really close to the point where you can go to an AI and say, "AI, play me a pop punk song about breaking up with my girlfriend." Right. And then it will just make this like pop punk emo song.
I know. To me, I'm like, are we heading to a place where, I can write a song on guitar and go, "Wow, that sounds like an Amy Mann song," and tell AI, "Here's my song, here's my melody. Can you replace my voice with Amy Mann's voice?" Will I have this song that in my head I can hear it, but there's no way in hell I can get her to sing on it. But, are we headed to that? Like, that's scary. Like, I was listening to Kevin Smith's podcast, and they were talking about AI from a filmmaking standpoint. And their point was, yes, you can take the script for the Terminator and Star Wars and Deadpool and throw them into a AI and say, spit me out a new story, but you'll get a very generic version back. Will AI be able to add the nuance that a writer would? Like, oh, well, this character has this tweak or this, and that's what I'm wondering, like, because once we hit that, I think that's terrible.
But even for now, what I think they'll do is they'll say, "AI, write me a song. I want it in this tempo, in this style, with this kind of vocals." You'll get back an 80% version, and then you'll say, "Okay, let's clean this up, put that little twist on it. We're good."
Yeah, I'll take it from here.
Yeah, there was a service that I was screwing around with that does AI song generation, and it's rudimentary. What they have is they have a basic algorithmic drum machine. They have basic algorithmic synth. So it's fairly rudimentary. But you could go in and say, "I want rock, I want hard rock, I want it to be moderately fast and aggressive." And then it will give you 60% of a song, and that's your starting point. And you can say, "Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, now let me finish it off, fill it out, and put that hook in it."
Here. Yeah, I don't know. For me, like, I'm both fascinated and terrified by it because, like, interesting that could happen, but kind of takes the fun out of it. You know,
Definitely.
if I wake up in the morning with an idea for a song and I run downstairs and I start voice memoing before it disappears, and then by the end of the day, I can have recorded the whole thing, that's exciting for me. If I wake up and go, computer, write me a song, 160 beats per minute, make it aggressive, you know, or
I'm sad today. Write me a ballad.
Right, write me a country song, include screen door, pickup truck, dirt road, go.
And it's
You know,
there, baby.
Like I
You know
just
what really scares me about this is the feedback loop. Because what we currently have is this is an apocalypse scenario. Do you know what the gray goo apocalypse is?
no.
So gray goo references like nanobots,
Okay.
and they'll start consuming matter and self-replicating until the point where you have so many nanobots, it's a gray goo eating everything and creating more of itself until the planet's destroyed, right?
Okay.
I feel like we have a digital version of that coming where humans have created all of this culture, and we have this library on the internet of all these different ideas. So we build things like ChatGPT, and what it does is it's a predictive text model that when you ask it a question, all it does is calculate the likelihood of a word occurring after another word. So it sounds like it's giving you smart insight or whatever.
Right.
But what happens when we start writing songs with AI, making movies with AI? The input to the AI becomes itself, right?
Right.
So if you have a predictive text model writing a script, it's writing a script based off of what humans created. But after 10 years of this, the AI will be programmed to produce scripts based off the scripts it wrote.
Yeah.
And so when you make a copy of a copy of a copy, eventually you're going to get...
Well, you've erased humanity entirely.
Yeah. And then humans are going to be broken-brained individuals who have no understanding because the AI... so there's a viral post where someone tells ChatGPT 2 + 2 = 5. And it says, no, that's wrong, it's 4. And I go, no, you're wrong. I'm telling you it's 5. And it goes, okay, I'm sorry, it's 5. You're going to get that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then what happens when the input models break? A year from now, ChatGPT genuinely believes 2 + 2 is 5. 10 years from now, there's kids who are like, computer, what's 2 + 2? 5. And they go, okay.
Right.
And they'll never know because the AI runs everything.
Yeah.
I think the only outcome there is total collapse of civilization if we become reliant on AI.
But I mean, I feel like that's what we already do with our media. Like we push a narrative, like, well, here's this thing. Is that really true? We're saying it's true, and then it gets repeated enough, and then you ask somebody, hey, what do you feel about that? Well, it's this and this and this.
Yeah.
Well, why do you know that? Well, I saw it on the news.
Yep.
It's like, what if I told you that's not true? Well, it can't be.
Have you ever heard of cytogenesis?
No.
There's you ever see the comic XKCD?
Mm-mm.
It's this guy's kind of, he's a bit of an insufferable intellectual type, but he's got some good takes. And this one is how Wikipedia fabricates information. And so the joke he uses is the invention of the scroll lock key on a keyboard. Mm-hmm. And he says what happens is somebody, for no reason, goes on Wikipedia and makes up a fake fact and just puts it in there. The scroll lock key was invented by so-and-so in 1970. A journalist who's writing a story, looking for a quick reference, will go to Wikipedia, see it, and then say, oh, okay, and write it into their article without fact-checking. Huh. Someone will then go on Wikipedia and say, what is this? There's no citation on here. They'll grab the article that was just written, attach it to the fact.
Now it's a citation.
Creating this, cytogenesis. And they'll be like, Google is your friend, guys, use sources, and then they'll use the... Mm-hmm. So I feel like we're already in the death spiral.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like what we've been living in already, especially the last 3 years.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about it is, for me, I do news commentary and then a news commentary show with guests. And I tell people all the time, like, you realize I'm reading the mainstream media. It's like, I read the New York Times. I don't necessarily trust them all the time. So I'll try and fact check and look for multiple sources. And if multiple sources are saying something happened, we can only operate under the assumption it happened. But holy crap, that's not always true. Yeah. Like with the Covington kids in the Lincoln Memorial. Every major outlet said, you remember the story, right? The kid standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and the Native American guy.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Every major outlet says this kid did something bad. All the major outlets say Kyle Rittenhouse was like a murderer or whatever. And you have to actually look for the source material and break through. But this means, I can't read every single academic report. I can't watch every single video. We're already here. Even the people you think are doing the best jobs possible are trapped in the same maelstrom as everybody else, and we're getting flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, well, and they're trapped in it, and also kind of beholden to this is the narrative that we are going with. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. Look at what happens to those people. They're over there in the corner of shame. You know?
I mean, that sounds like Mao Cultural Revolution stuff.
Yeah.
You know, this podcast is called The Culture War, but I wasn't like literally intending on it to talk about nothing but the culture war. But I just feel like it's going to happen with everybody. Mm-hmm. There's going to be some element of it where every conversation is going to mention. I'm hoping that if enough people say, hey, that's kind of fucked up, that people are all marching in lockstep. We need some original thought. Maybe that'll be the path forward. But that requires people to say, I am Spartacus. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not just point at you and be like, you be Spartacus. I'll be over here hiding in the bushes.
Yeah, that's enough. You keep going.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing about it.
It looks like you can take it. It's like, yeah, but it's lonely. You know, be nice to spread the slaps around a little bit.
Yeah. I wonder if the end result of all of this is people like you, people like me, people who are listening to a show like this, the ones who are willing to speak out, speak up, or at the very least prepare. All of the people who are just going to say whatever they think they have to say will end up in a really bad position. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, this is hilarious. I did my first ad for safeandreadymeals.com, which is like emergency food prep.
Yeah.
And instantly you get corporate press mocking me. Vice is like, Tim Pool's a prepper. Look how corny and cringe this is. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I don't care. You know, it makes me laugh. If you are of such weak mind that you would not have a first aid kit, water, or food because someone got made fun of and you're scared of being made fun of, you will die when a blizzard comes.
Yeah.
Like they got in California 7 feet of snow in some areas and like 14 feet in some areas. Mm-hmm. I saw this clip of a dude opens his door and it's a wall of snow. I'm like, I bet he'd be really excited. He's got some beans in his pantry that are going to last him a couple months if he needs to eat them.
A couple bags of rice.
Yeah. But there are people who are scared of being made fun of.
Right.
So they'll be like, I didn't buy any emergency supplies. I'm not a weirdo. It's like, okay, well, you know, I don't care. You'll die. I won't.
But that's how you get in trouble is everybody like, well, you don't want to get called crazy. You know, you don't want to get labeled an anti-vaxxer. That's the worst thing you can be. That's worse than any other term. And it's just kind of like, it's a stupid term. Yeah. You know, but if you need to label people, but yeah, you don't want to be prepared. Like you don't have a first aid kit. You don't have some water. Like that should just be standard of living.
I think people need to realize that you can't win with the cult, even if you bend the knee. Oh. So like the story I've told several times on Timcast IRL, when I got COVID, the doctor I had prescribed antibodies, monoclonal antibodies, steroids as an emergency for, inflammation in the lungs if we needed. We never used it. But they also prescribed ivermectin. Mm-hmm. And I've not been convinced that ivermectin works. I'm still not. There was a recent, there's this prominent journalist who's very critical of big pharma and vaccines. He's been censored several times. I don't want to drag him into it, so I won't say his name. But even he's come out and said, like, look, another meta-analysis of ivermectin is showing nothing. So anyway, I'm not here to get into that whole debate. Yeah. But the doctor prescribed it. And I said, I do what my doctor said. Okay, I trust my doctor. And after I got the monoclonal antibodies, because I got that in emergency, like right away, I end up getting the ivermectin a few days later, but I felt totally fine.
Right.
And so I said to my doctor, I don't want to take it. I was like, honestly, I don't think I need it. I don't want to take anything if I'm feeling good. Like, so if I'm good now, I'd rather just not take medication. Okay. And the doctor said, if you relapse, which has happened, if you get sick again, you will regret that you did not follow my prescription. So take the medication I told you to take. And I said, fair point. Okay, doc, you're right. And then the media called me the poster boy of ivermectin.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? Like, you can't even win. You agree with them, and they will still
it doesn't matter.
Attack you.
Everybody is primed to hate something. And if they've decided that you are on the list of people to be hated, they will find a reason to come after you. It doesn't matter. It's so boring.
There was a post I saw where the media wrote that you were an anti-vaxxer or whatever. And I'm like, this dude literally just posted that his doctor told him he's at risk of Guillain-Barré and not to get it. That's not an anti-vaxxer. That's like, well, my doctor, that's what we're telling people to do. Trust their doctors, right?
Right, but here's the point. Performing abundances of caution and performing goodness out there, they say, well, everyone needs to get this so we can protect the vulnerable people who can't get it. And I go, cool, I'm one of those people. And it's like, no, fuck you. You got to take it too.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, then you're
What?
just performing now.
Right.
Like your words mean nothing. And, so yeah, call me anti-vaxxer, come after me for whatever. It's just.
Have they made up other lies about you and you're like.
I honestly, I don't pay attention to what they're
Smart.
saying. It comes to me through like people will tell me, hey, they said this, hey, they said that, and so I will, I don't enjoy still talking about this. Like it's not the entirety of who I am, what happened to me. It's a very small part of my life, right? But I will correct the record when I hear something that I think is inaccurate.
Isn't that the worst? That like a random person will send you a message being like, here's someone talking shit about you, please watch it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, dude, I know people talk shit. I don't want to watch this, man.
Well, it's not even public stuff. It's like, I know people connected with them I'm not going to call anybody out, but so I hear what's said behind the scenes and, so I just try to correct what I think is inaccurate. That's all I can do, but I'm not dwelling on it. I don't sit there. Like, to me, I just want to be creative. I want to move on with my life and do stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah, I'm hoping that with the stuff that we're doing, we've got the new studio we're building. It's big. We filmed the music video there. It's crazy. I'm just hoping that some days it feels like trying to knock down a skyscraper with a ball peen hammer. Just like one guy like hitting it, and you're like, good luck. Maybe in 10,000 years you might actually move this thing. But I'm hoping that there'll be an exponential return, a snowball rolling down a hill where if we start doing shows, if we start making new cultural content, and then we just say, listen, I wish people would all stand up and speak up, but I understand they're scared. But if we can carve out a space where they feel safe, we win.
Yeah.
So for all the people who are like, look, man, if I speak up, I'll lose my job. I want to be like, okay, well, we've got jobs for you.
Right.
Speak up now. And if you do get fired, we're looking for a insert job.
Yeah.
We're not big enough at Timcast. I mean, we're decently large enough to do cool stuff, hire you to do music, and other people. We had Taylor Silverman. She was skating in these contests, and then she's competing against biological males. She speaks up. There's like a cultural attack against her, which is damaging for anybody who's trying to have a career, and especially skateboarding is woke.
Yeah.
So I said we need a host for the skate show we're doing, which has been like put on hiatus, unfortunately. But she's been fantastic, and I want to make sure that anybody who is speaking up, we create that parallel economy, and we create a functioning system. So nobody goes broke doing the right thing.
Well, that's the thing. Like, there has to be a place where, as an artist, you shouldn't need anyone's permission to create. And that's the thing. I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to get in trouble for this. I won't be able to create. Well, nothing's stopping you from creating, like even cancel culture, like, oh, I got canceled or whatever. Like you can't be canceled if you don't agree to it. Like, I don't agree to it. I'm not going to skulk away in the dark and never make music again or never create again. I'm going to keep going about my life. You guys can dance around issues and spout nonsense all you want about, oh, don't, this person's canceled, but I don't agree to it. So,
yeah, that's true, but they can make it hard. Like,
it's hard.
Take your bank account from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's not for the faint of heart, and I understand why not everybody feels like they've got the stomach for it.
Yeah,
but yeah, you gotta what you're doing, creating a cultural space of like, we don't need these gatekeepers. Like, we put up a Timcast song, goes to #1 on iTunes, right in front of Taylor Swift. And it's like
two of them did. The last two
hit
the top of iTunes. It's crazy.
Yeah, right. So that should be a big story, right? But who's going to cover that? Mainstream music press? No, because they're going to go, well, those guys didn't do it the right way. They didn't go through the gates that we set up. And it's just like, well, who are you to tell us whether we get to create or not, or whether we get to be successful or not? Like, we put out a song, like Story, this band out of nowhere that no one's ever heard of, is in front of Taylor Swift on the iTunes chart. Should have been a cover of Rolling Stone. Instead, it's crickets because, oh, that would be great, but not those guys.
We've put out, you and I have 2 songs that are out, and I've put out 3 total songs, all of which have hit Billboard to some degree.
Yeah.
Will of the People came out right before the 2020 election, and it only charted because of Only Ever Wanted, which we put out last August, I think. So, I'll take it, but, to be fair, It's like it's getting lifted up. But we put out our first song, Only Ever Wanted, and it hit like number 14 in rock, and it hits like 4 or 5 different charts on Billboard, top digital sale, like number 2 in digital sales behind, I think, like Elton John.
And Britney, yeah, their duet.
We put out Genocide, and this one charted on a couple, hit number 1 on iTunes, number 4 in digital sales. Granted, at that point we're competing with like Taylor Swift and Sam Smith, I think. So it's like,
That's a lot.
But this is the crazy thing is the people that I've talked to in the industry are like, for a new artist, regardless of your show and your notoriety, having 2 songs like a month out from each other hit Billboard should have been written up in all of these places. It should have been big news. It should have been like, this band's hitting it for some reason. But we got messages. Our PR person sends out messages like, hey, check out this song. The song Only Ever Wanted that we released, what is it? Like an angsty, emo-ish kind of like love
nothing
song?
political. It's a love song.
It's like a song about a guy who
regret.
His wife dies.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's regret. And it's relatively soft for a while with a heavy ending. They email us back saying, go fuck yourselves. They email us back saying, fuck your MAGA chud rock. Mm-hmm. And it was weird because the things that some of these journalists were saying were like generic tweets we had seen.
Right.
Like someone said, like there was a viral thing where like, this is butt rock. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, butt rock is a reference like Nickelback. And I'm like, I don't know, like an honest assessment would be it's more emo-ish than that, considering, Carter's influences and my influences. It doesn't sound like Nickelback at all. Mm-hmm. But then all of a sudden we started getting journalists being like, haha, LOL, butt rock. And I'm like, do you guys actually do your job? Do you
listen? Do you have 3 minutes of attention span to pay attention to a song, or have you gotten your marching orders and you're going
marching orders, man?
Yeah.
This is the thing people need to realize about the music industry. It's all bought and paid for.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
It's a fake machine. This is why what scares me about the modern era is that everything is a plastic, synthetic replica of what things used to be, right? It used to be like if you did good music, like initially, if you made good music, you got popular, people liked it. An element of that still exists. But for the most part, the biggest musicians, the biggest bands, fabricated, plastic, manufactured.
Yep.
So, I mean, people have said like, oh, you guys did really well on iTunes, but no one buys music anymore. And I'm like, exactly.
Yeah, but listen to what you just said. Enough people bought it that we were number 1 on iTunes. So, but now you're saying, but that doesn't matter.
Well, but the issue there is artists can't motivate someone to buy their music anymore. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. What that says to me is, and I feel this too, I have a subscription to Spotify. I just press radio.
Right.
And then I don't even know who's playing the music anymore. And so the influence of these musicians is minimal. If I can influence more people to buy music than Taylor Swift, I mean, that says a lot.
But even think about where we are with music. People don't buy music anymore. Well, how did that happen? Like, did anyone push back against it? Or did everybody go along? I don't want to make waves. This looks like the new thing that we're doing.
You know what we should do? Probably shouldn't just say this on a show we're going to publish. We should totally write a song and then change the song later to make a point. Like, we could put a song up and then 2 weeks later, re-upload a slightly different version, have everyone get all bent out of shape, like, whoa, what is this? It's like a different song. They'll be like, did you buy it? Right. Because this is what they're doing now, like the Ronald Dahl books.
Yeah. And the James Bond stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're like, James Bond was racist before, so we got to change the whole book.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we made a change to the song. Did you buy the original? Well, then you have it.
That's right.
But if you're just depending on something streaming to you, that can get changed. That's a good point. It can get changed at any time.
Think about video games, like a video game would come out, Street Fighter 2, which I'm sure you know. There's combos in Street Fighter 2. That was a bug. The way it goes is that if you input the commands for a move in rapid succession, there is no frame between the moves, making your character effectively invincible. And doing these moves in such rapid succession, the opponent can't block it. And when that happened, at first they were like, oh crap, this is a problem. But then they realized it became a skill. If you could execute a combo perfectly, you deserved to get those hits. And so then they incorporated it into the game. Like, okay, like actually, it's not a bug, it's a feature. Mm-hmm. Modern video games, if that happens, you know what they do?
Yeah, the bug fix.
Bug fix.
Yeah.
Over the airwaves patch. The game changes overnight, and then all of a sudden, this thing you were doing that was fun doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
That sucks.
It sucks. Yeah.
TV shows too, like they did with Netflix. Yeah, like there was what show was it? There was a Netflix show. This was a big deal. They it came out an episode, and then everyone's like, "Whoa!" And then they edited a scene and changed it.
Really?
Yeah,
they re-upload it.
I mean, they did it with Game of Thrones too, and there's like a water bottle or something.
Oh, the Starbucks cup.
Starbucks cup. That's
that
what it was.
Funny.
They edited the episodes but if you bought it when it came out, you got the Starbucks cup. Think about how crazy that is. That's what we're going. This is the scary thing about deepfakes and AI and the modern digital space is that there will be no history anymore. Time will become like solid state.
Yeah.
You'll say, "Hey, remember when that rock star said that thing about Vietnam?" And you'll go, "Who?" You'll be like, "Don't you remember the video? Let me pull up the concert. We'll play it." And then he comes out and he goes something like, "I have nothing to say about Vietnam. Have a nice day." And you're like,
Right.
wait, hold on a minute. What?
You're like, that's not it. But then you look like a crazy person because you're like, no, he said it, I swear.
Yeah, and they'll be like, "You're suffering from the Mandela effect, bro."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if that's what it is? Like the Mandela effect is just the internet is being changed.
It's our simulation glitching.
Not necessarily. I mean, so for those that aren't familiar with the Mandela effect, there are people who believe like multiple dimensions overlap or something, and like history gets erased. They think the fruit of the loom used to have a cornucopia. It's a bundle of fruit with a cornucopia, but now it's a bundle of fruit. And they're like, "What happened to the cornucopia?" And everyone says, "There's no cornucopia. There never was."
Yeah.
But then someone points out there's a parody of Fruit of the Loom with metal fruit, and it has the cornucopia in it from the same time period. So what the fuck? I don't know. It originates from people who think that they swear that Nelson Mandela died in prison, but then later he was alive. And I'm like, yeah, that could just be the news was wrong.
Yeah.
Like you trust these people and you believed it. But what if a lot of it is actually online? They erase things and change things to fit modern narratives.
Right.
That's it, man.
Yeah.
You're not going to know what is and what your past was. You're going to listen to music and you're going to be like, "I love that song about, well, I mean, for one, we were talking about how the Offspring got rid of the song Kill the President.
Right.
That's just getting rid of it outright.
Yeah.
It'd be funny if they re-released it as Save the President.
Right. Like, oh, I love that song, about oranges. That song's about apples now. What?
Yeah. We should do that. That's actually a good idea for a stunt. Now we told everyone we're going to do it. And so, yeah, man. Well, anyway, this has been a blast. Is there, so you're doing Defiant. Obviously we're making music, we're hanging out. Is there anything else that people should know about in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody needs drum tracks, I have my own studio. I record every day. Go to my website, peteparada.com. Send me a message there. Have my sound pack. I work with other artists. Some stuff I can't even talk about yet. That's not coming out. So it's just like, I'm always busy. I'm always working. But I appreciate coming and sitting down with you.
Was it worth it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a year and a half ago when I was a ball of shit on the floor, rolled up catatonic, I maybe had a different view of it, but
that bad,
with some time, and yeah, I mean, you're watching everything you've worked for crater, and everyone you thought you knew scatter.
Damn.
Like that's heavy. That takes a while to come back out from under and get your sea legs again, and that's why I haven't talked to anybody till now. Yeah,
I appreciate you talking, man, because I know I reached out initially, and you were very much like, you didn't want to make be a spectacle. You didn't want the story to be around you and whatever. And but you did the right thing. And I got to say, it's like, it's not even a philosophical thing. It's like your doctor was like, "Hey, bro, this is bad," and you went, "Okay," and then you become this like,
right.
It's like. The story isn't that you stood up on a rock and said, "I reject the mandates. The people should not be forced." You went, "I got a note from my doctor that says I could be at risk if I get this. I don't think I can get it." And then they fired you because of it. And now they try to, it's like unintentional almost, it's not even about doing the right thing. You did the right thing for yourself. And here we are.
Yeah, but like I said at the time too, I have a medical exemption and whatever, but I also don't feel like anybody should have the right to force anything on you, your employers, your government, anyone.
Yeah.
And it was important to make that distinction at the time because I didn't want to be hiding behind my exemption, saying, "I'm cool over here, but the rest of you are on your own."
But it is good. I think it is a good thing in that you made them expose their bullshit hand. That even like you mentioned, hey, we need to get this because of the vulnerable people who can't, and you went, yeah, that's me, and they said, fuck you.
Yep.
So that just shows they were full of shit the whole time.
Yeah.
Anyway, wrap up on a lighter note, I guess. Is there anything else you want to add, like where people can find you or whatever? I think you mentioned it already.
Yeah, I mean, on Twitter, just at Pete Parada, and same thing on Instagram. I don't do Facebook, so if there's anything on there, that's not me. And just my website, peteparada.com. That's it.
Right on, man. And for everybody listening or watching, thanks so much for checking this out. If you really do like the show and you think we're doing a good job with it and having these expanded conversations, the most powerful thing you can do is just tell your friends about it. Have them listen in the car or whatever. Podcasts grow by word of mouth. So I really do appreciate everyone's support with this new endeavor. Become a member at timcast.com to support our work, and we'll see y'all next time.